Hey everyone, I'm Dilhan from Urban Plant Growers. Welcome to our second webinar. This week we'll be speaking about plant maintenance and some plant tips. And we'll also have a bit of a live demo on how you can maintain your products and make sure it's all clean, looking spick and span and growing your plants effectively. We are expecting a couple more people, so we will wait a little while until we start. But in the meantime, if you could introduce yourself in the chat, say hello, maybe tell us a bit about what you're hoping to find out in this webinar and what Urban Plant Growers products you have, then that would be fantastic. Thank you. Hey, Susie, thanks for introducing yourself. What products have you got? I can't hear you, Susie. The chat is open for you. As in, like, you'll have to type. Hey, Damien, how are you? Awesome. Okay, got a couple of people who are interested in just learning a bit more about Urban Plant Growers, and then Melody, of course, has the Speedy Sprouter. We do have a Speedy Sprouter that we can give you a couple of tips on today if you're interested. So if you've just joined, we are just going to start in a couple of minutes, just giving it a little bit longer for a couple of people to join the event. Melody, I think you should eat your sprouts within about 10 days of starting them. Give it a proper wash before you're actually eating them, and make sure that you've been rinsing and repeating throughout the process as you go. And that's awesome, Damien. What kind of plants are you growing? Great to hear, Helen. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. Great. So it looks like the attendees have sort of leveled off a little bit. So we will do a quick round of introductions and then go into the agenda for today and what we're going to talk about. So to begin with, I'm Dilhan. I'm the co-founder of Urban Plant Growers. I started the business 3 years ago with Peter Cole. And, we've been slowly, bit by bit, growing it and kind of trying to increase the ways that we can meet your requirements and help you to grow your own food in the comfort of your own home. This is the second webinar in our series, and it's definitely just aimed at trying to get all of you, people who haven't bought yet or people who have bought, to get the most out of your products, because we genuinely don't want to sell products that are just going to sit on your shelves and eventually die and you'll throw them out. We want people getting the most use out of them. And to do that, we're trying to educate people on the best ways to use them. So we really appreciate all of you joining this webinar to kind of find out more about that. You can see Tamara is on the other side of the screen there. She does have a family farm and indoor smart garden in the background, so the lighting is a bit bad, but it is due to the fact that she'll be giving us a little bit of a demo towards the end of this presentation. So Tamara, if you could unmute yourself and give a bit of an introduction to the crowd, that would be fantastic.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamara, and I am the warehouse manager at Urban Plant Growers. Been there since I suppose inception, but just working there about a couple of months now. Good to hear I've seen your messages as well. Nice to meet you all, and I look forward to talking to you a little bit later.
Fantastic. So we'll get into the slides and do a bit of the background on what we're going to discuss, and then we'll give you the demonstration towards the end. So let's get to it. To begin with, many of you might be interested in Urban Plant Growers. We do have a Facebook community group. This is an excellent way to get in touch with other people who are interested in growing hydroponically or just growing plants indoors. We try to keep it small, so for people who are really interested, because I don't like the idea of big Facebook groups that have thousands of people but no one really talks. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, Damien, it seems like it's something you might be interested in, judging by your microgreens comment in the chat, then I definitely think you should hop on board and it might be for you. If you were unlucky enough to miss the last webinar, we do have a recap blog post on our website. We've also put the full recording up on YouTube. Similar to the last webinar, we'll do the exact same for this one and put it up on YouTube. If you follow us in our email subscriber list, then you will receive a link to the YouTube video in our monthly newsletter, which will come out tomorrow. Otherwise, if this is your first webinar, feel free to get in touch if there's anything you think we should cover next time for our webinar 3. If not, then yeah, just enjoy your time and listen up. So going through a quick agenda for today, we will begin with announcing the May photo comp winners. So as a bit of background, we offered out an eco kitchen for free to the person who provided the coolest picture of one of their urban plant growers products. We then put the voting out to the public on our website, and everyone was able to vote. And in the end, we obviously had one winner and then one voting prize to a random person within the audience. So we'll start off by announcing that. We'll then go into a bit of theory about how we think you should best set up your urban plant grower product for success before finally going into some practical tips. We'll also have some question time towards the end where you can ask us whatever. But yeah, you can also chat throughout the whole time in the chat over here, get to know each other and say hello. So, announcing the winner of our May photo competition. The winner is Rebecca Wasley with this amazing photo of one of the Full Spectrum 3 grow lights. It's an absolutely stunning, it looks like a bedroom. There's some plant shelves, some indoor plants, and then some beautiful looking grow lights. This is just such an amazing vibe. I can see why people voted for this. It's very aesthetic, and I'm really happy that we had an entrant like this into the competition. So Rebecca will be winning an eco kitchen. So lucky her. Now to announce the participation prize for a random person in the voting audience. The winner was Fedor Siganov. Apologies if I mispronounced that. We did a random number generator, and this was the correct answer. So a grow light will be going your way. So congratulations to everyone who participated. Thank you so much for taking part. So moving on to the theory of how to grow in your home. The first thing to consider is how you can set yourself up for success. So before you've even started planting anything or situating your product, you need to think about what are the conditions of the plant that you're going to grow. For example, if you've got basil, it's a tropical plant. You might want it to be in a warmer environment that's more humid, has better airflow. Other plants may prefer the cold. I think the main things to consider are things like airflow. Without proper airflow, the transpiration or the evaporation of water through the plant itself won't occur, and that will lead to the stem and the leaves of the plants having stagnant water inside them. And when it's got stagnant water inside them, they will rot and the plants will die. So you do need to have a reasonable amount of airflow. Some of our products, like the Family Farm, will have built-in fans. But if you're using something like a Easy Grow or a Breezy Grow light, then you wouldn't have this, so you'd have to consider this yourself. The best way to do it could be to put your plant near a window, or if you've got a natural draft through your house, utilize that. Another thing you may need to consider is humidity. The general rule of thumb, which we typically recommend, is to stay between 40 and 60%. For most homes in Sydney, that would be quite typical, but as you go further north, it might be more humid, and you may have to learn how to control that a little bit better if you've got a plant that requires low humidity and you're living in a place with like 70 or 80% humidity in the far north of Australia. The other thing to consider would be temperature. So if you live in a home which is an apartment, for example, you may have colder temperatures towards the building core, so typically the entrance door of your apartment, and hotter temperatures towards the window or the exterior. And that may actually flip around winter, obviously because the outdoor conditions fluctuate a lot more than the indoor conditions would. If you're lucky enough to have a two-story house, then the upstairs would typically be warmer than the downstairs. So if you have a plant that loves heat, then it would definitely be recommended that you put the product upstairs and utilize that available heat to grow your plant better. The final thing to consider is the lighting levels of your plant. So while our grow lights do kind of take this out of it, you do need to worry about whether you're providing too much light or whether you're giving a plant that doesn't really need any light more than it would require. The way you could think about this would be whether your plant's getting indirect light from sunlight or no light at all, and then what timer setting or intensity setting you're using your product with. It does vary from product to product, and it is quite hard to generalize, but you can typically tell through a couple of methods that we'll cover further in this presentation. In terms of germinating seeds, there are a few things that you should note while you're doing this. So this picture over here would be fenugreek, and that's quite an easy one to grow. You soak it in water for 5 or 6 hours, and that softens it up. It activates the seed, and through activating the seed, it knows that, okay, like it's time to grow. Then it starts triggering that growth, and the sprout will come out. Some other seeds are a bit more difficult. So everyone's seen a mango seed. The big fluffy thing with the fur on it isn't actually the seed. The seed is inside that bit. So you crack that open and then you get the actual seed. There's quite a few plants that are like that. Spinach is a bit like that. Silver beet is also a bit like that. They're both sort of from the same family. Those ones you have to think about whether they need anything special to grow. You could also have a condition where you have seeds that need scarification or some kind of stress. So for example, cherries need to be put in the freezer essentially for a couple of weeks before they're ready to take out and germinate. And that's so that you simulate winter. And once you've simulated winter, it knows, okay, now it must be spring. It's time to grow. It's safe, and the frost won't kill me as a plant. So yeah, all these things can come into consideration when you're talking about growing a seed. But the main thing to consider is do a bit of research, look at the seed you're getting, think about what natural conditions it would grow in. The things that always come back to us is, have you activated the seed or not? And by activated, we mean, have you physically added water to it so that the seed gets wet and it knows that it's time to grow? And is the temperature warm enough? So to increase the temperature, you could use something like a little greenhouse. You could put a plastic see-through cup on top of your product and see if that insulates the heat a little bit more, or you could put your product in a warm room and see if that has any effect. The other thing to consider would be timeframes. So not all seeds germinate at the same rate. Things like basil, you could start having a small gel form over the seeds quite quickly, up to a couple of hours after wetting them. But then they may grow very slowly, and you wouldn't expect them to take off so quickly after turning into that gel. But other things might take 2 weeks, 3 weeks before they show any sign of the seed breaking and the plant coming out. It really just depends on what that seed is. In terms of harvesting plants, there are a few different considerations and a few different types of plants. You'll typically come across multiple varieties of plants that need to be harvested. So, for example, the typical one would be basil. You can see in the picture on the left there, it's sort of just been left to grow on its own. And what happens is it just keeps growing upwards. Whereas in the picture on the right there, right above a stem node, it's been trimmed in the middle. And by trimming it in the middle, it's forced those other 2 little leaves to grow outwards. And those become new stems, and new plants come off that. So you end up getting a really nice bushy plant. And that is very well suited to our urban plant growers kits, because they're small and bushy, which means they can fit underneath the grow light, and it means you can get more plants for the amount of area and the amount of net cups or the size of your smart garden that you've got. On the other hand, there are plants like chives and dill, which there's less of it's less intuitive how you would trim it or harvest it. Chives, for example, you typically would cut it all in one go and harvest it at once, whereas dill, it'll go up, it'll have a main stem, and then it'll also have a small stem that comes off the side. You would trim the small stem off and let the main stem keep growing and just keep growing. And you can keep doing that for quite a while before the dill finally dies at the end of its 16 weeks or so of life. A thing to note about harvesting plants is it accelerates the growth of many plants. And that's a really good thing, because you've got the same size roots, but you've got less plant leaf to support. So the remaining leaves grow quite quickly, especially, I guess the plant roots just kind of give it that extra oomph. And we will go into a couple of plant trimmings down the track in this webinar. So in terms of some ways to identify plant health in terms of the light itself, there are a couple of signs to when your plant is getting too much light or not enough light. So just running through these quickly, if you're getting too much light, your plants might be, their leaves might be curling. You might typically see this in a lot of plants around the edges. They'll go a little bit dark and then they'll curl upwards. That's obviously just it getting too much light. So the recommendation for this would be to move your light a little bit further away from the leaf of the plant, or reduce the intensity setting, or reduce the timer. With the Easy Grow, Breezy Grow, and full spectrum lights that we have, you can do that quite easily. With the Eco Kitchen or the Indoor Smart Gardens, it's a bit more about positioning. Similarly, if your leaves are wilting while the light is shining on them, then that could also be a situation where you've got too much light. Leaves fading, leaves becoming less green, leaves becoming scorched or brown, the new leaves being very small, these are all signs of too much light. On the contrary, signs that your plant is not getting enough light could be the leaves turning yellow or pale, variegated leaves losing their variegation, and plants becoming spindly and bending towards the window. So if you've got a plant bending, that's a strong sign that there's not enough light being supplied. You could also have the case where your plants aren't flowering, or there's no growth in the growing seasons. And then, of course, plants dropping older leaves and new ones being smaller. That's a typical sign of the plant not having enough energy to support the leaves that it's producing. The solutions for this would pretty much be the opposite of the solutions to too much light. So if your plant's getting not enough light, then bring the light closer to the plants, increase the intensity if you've got one of our grow lights, and increase the timer setting if you've also got a grow light that has an adjustable timer. So now I'm going to hand over to Tamara, who's going to speak a little bit about just a couple of tips on how you can maintain your plants in practice. She's got a family farm, an indoor smart garden, and a lot of tips that I'm sure she's willing to help you out with. Just a quick note, it is a bit difficult to film with a very, very bright family farm. So we try to do our best, but let's just see how we go. I'll hand over to you, Tamara.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to really basically talk to you a little bit about the end of life and basically how you would look after your plants. So as you can see here, I've got the family unit going here. I'm sorry, it's a little bit dark in here, but I have here pink kale, and this is a crimson lettuce, and I have some mint and chicory growing down in this other unit further down there, if you can see that one there. Yeah, so basically, you grow your plants and you come to a time where you think, okay, like this is now at maturity, I can see that this one is, and I'm ready to actually trim them and use them for my food. I can see that I have put a couple of seeds in here. I don't know whether you can see this. There's a small little new one coming up here, but then the original plant is growing quite well. So because this is a lettuce, I start to actually trim. I can't move too fast, so sorry about that. I start to trim the leaves from the bottom outwards. So as you can see, you take the bottom leaves when you're trimming them, and you let the middle continue to grow, and you get some nice healthy leaves here. I hope you can see them. They're looking good. This one here is a kale. So it's
Sorry, Tamara, could you bring the camera a bit closer to the family farm, please?
Yeah, I might bring the family farm closer, if you can see that. Can you see that a little bit better?
That's better, thank you.
All right, awesome. So as you can see here, this is the pink kale. And again, I continue to trim it when I need them. They are sprouting, they are little kales, so you can use them in your salads and so on. And from the middle here, it'll start growing again. So that's a really nice thing. Further down here, I have the mint as well. Dilhan mentioned before, the more you trim your mint, it grows bushier, and this is a typical example of that. I had a little plant, something like this here growing. I trimmed a piece and I popped it in here, and you can see this is starting to grow, and it's quite branched out quite well and really healthy in this sense here. So basically, you've used these now, and you're ready to clean up your unit. You're going to use, like your all your leaves, and then you want to sort of start, I suppose, cleaning it up. So cut off all the plants that you need to. So for example, I might pull this out, and I'm ready to take this one out. It's quite hard. As you can see, it has a really long, strong stem in it. It's a massive lettuce that's grown quite really well. And now I would just take it out of the unit, and then you get this piece here. You have the rock wool here as well that you can remove, and you can discard it, like in either in the bin or somewhere in the corner of the garden, and then you use your lettuce. So once you have removed that part of it and it's ready to go, you get your rock wool. You'll get the net cup here. Now, I wanted to show you in this net cup here. I don't know, you probably might not be able to see, but there's a little bit of growth around it, a little bit of maybe algae, a little bit of dirt, on that. So the best thing to do is I actually take a toothbrush and I just clean it right around with some soapy water, and then that makes that really, quite clean, and it comes out quite new as well. I do the same to the unit as well. So basically, when I'm washing this, I get some nice soapy water. Dishwashing liquid is fine. Give it a good scrub in there in your sink, and then give it a good dry, and then you're ready to replant your seeds. So when you're replanting, again, I've got this new rock wool in here in a cleaned net cup. So I'll add the rock wool into it. I'll pop it into the unit, and usually I get a spray bottle, and I will spray it so that I can wet the rock wool, and then I will put some seeds into it. This time I intend to put some chrysanthemums, and I've got a shelf going at the bottom there, which I will hopefully do plant in there. So I'll add some chrysanthemums into it. One of the other things I really wanted to share with you is whether you have an eco kitchen or indoor smart garden, or whether you have a family farm, I like to stagger my growth. So basically, I will start with one. A couple of weeks later, I'll go to the next one, and to the next one, and next one. That way, with the growth, everything is not ready at the same time. Now, you can do that if you like. You can do 6 at a time if you just have an eco kitchen. But if you have an indoor smart garden, you can do 1 pot at a time rather than both together. So that makes it a little bit, more. It lengthens the growth of yours and the usage of you as well. The second thing I suppose I wanted to speak to you about is, now while we're growing, we know sometimes, and some of you have already mentioned this to us, is that you can have some algae growing. Now, algae is a natural thing that grows anywhere in any plant, but regardless, it can also grow in here if the nutrient level is not balanced really well, and that can happen from time to time. If you do have it, some of the things that you can do is first thing I can do is I can pick this whole unit out, and I can put it under the tap or with a hose, and you can wash it out. But if you can't do that, you can actually take the bottle, and you pick this up. I like doing it here. If you don't have too much algae, it's fine. And then you spray it, and you will see that the algae will come out. If you keep spraying that, and you can see. I don't know whether you can see it there. It comes out. Or
Tamar,
you can
would you be able to do a close up on that one, please?
Yes. Okay. I'll try, but
maybe just leave it in the family farm and then move the camera.
Lean it into the family farm. Yes. Can you see it? Can you see that now? So you just spray it. So you just spray it so that you spray it with a strong, like a spray, and then it will start cleaning up the algae on it, and you can see it on the. Can you see?
Yeah.
It
So just to
so much
confirm,
better?
if you can't see that, a lot of sprays will have like a wide angle spray and then a narrow jet spray. Put it on the narrow one, and then bring it quite close to the rock wool cube and give it a spray, and it'll actually just dislodge all of the algae from the rock wool cube, and it'll look really neat and clean when you're done. You don't need to use any chemicals or anything special.
Yeah. So sometimes the other issue that some people have mentioned is that they might have mold. Now, I have noticed that sometimes, I mean, I haven't had much mold, but sometimes, there's a white color sort of residue on the top of the unit. Now, there are two reasons for this. One, it could be mold. Secondly, it could be a buildup of nutrients on it. So you need to recognize which one it is so that you understand whether it's actually mold or whether it's actually nutrients. If it's a nutrient, you just wash it out again like you did with the algae. If it's not the nutrient and it's the mold, I mean, then you just grab the same bottle, you add some hydrogen peroxide into it. So 1 part to 10 parts of water, and then you spray it a little bit. And the mold will then disappear from there. If you have a severe mold problem, it's best you take it out and dip it in there, soak it in the hydrogen water, and then wash it out at a later time and then put it back into the unit because you don't want the hydrogen being in there.
For reference, the hydrogen peroxide is just H2O2. So when it breaks down in water, it just turns into hydrogen and oxygen. So it's completely non-toxic. It's not really a chemical. You can get it at pharmacies in like 3 or 4%. And it's just a very low concentration. That's quite a safe thing to use for your plants. A lot of people also use it in microgreens as well. If you've had experience growing microgreens in tray, I think Damien in the chat you might have, then you could use those to reduce the amount of mold or anything that you have growing on the seeds themselves, because the seeds are obviously pretty much always wet.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to show you the top as well here. I've got 2 indoor smart gardens. That, of course, is off the timer at the moment, and this one is still on the timer. And again, I have coriander growing there, basil, and this one here is a bonsai Thai, like a green as well there. I mean, it's a similar thing. The pots, you can grow it at different stages so that you stagger your growth, and you are able to, have your crops rotating. Basically, it's a good thing to do to rotate your crops so that you don't grow everything together and then decide, oh my gosh, what do I do now? At the moment, I do have that because I have grown some sprouting, alfalfa and some sprouting broccoli, and I have so much of it that I kind of think, oh, I put too much in it. But I suppose, it's just a matter of getting your quantities right. You think I know that by now, but anyway. So I think that's about it for me. Unless you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll go over towards the end of the slides and we'll just start our QA. So if anyone has any questions they're interested in asking, I might just go through the chat and see what's there and try to address as many of them as possible.
Yeah, I have a question that I've seen there from Corinne. So she's asking, do I need to drain the smart garden each time, or can I keep topping up nutrients? Now, you can keep topping up nutrients until, its growth comes to, a good growth. I would kind of be careful about how much nutrients you put, depend on the plant that you're using, but also not to fill it up too often, because if you put it up too often, like Dilhan mentioned before, the roots might start rotting and then you might lose your plant. So just be careful about how often you top it when you're topping it.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of considerations to it as well. So in our products, I would generally recommend you only top up nutrients if you've got like a nutrient meter that you can use to test how much nutrients there are in the water. Otherwise, it can become a bit, hard to estimate. In the last webinar, we did cover a little bit of that where we were talking about how when it's very hot and dry, the plants will consume a lot of water, but not much nutrients. So the leftover nutrient concentration will be really high because the plants obviously used a lot of water, but the same amount of nutrients. If the opposite's true and it's very humid and, I don't know, maybe cold, you would have the plant using very little water, but the same amount of nutrients. So you'd have quite a dilute amount of nutrients in the solution. So I think with our products generally, you can probably just get away with adding the right amount of nutrients at the start and then not really needing to again until they're halfway down. If you know the conditions, you could guesstimate and figure out whether you need to add nutrients or add water. But if you have a nutrient meter, then you can test. And our last webinar went into exactly how you could do that. In commercial growing, they test every day and they top up every single day. And at the end of 2 weeks, they throw out all of the water and add in new water and add in new nutrients. And the reason for that is you get these micronutrient buildups, so little trace elements and stuff like that don't get consumed in the proper amounts. That builds up in the system. And when there's too much of that, it can be bad. So they just reflush the whole water. A couple of things they do with the water, just out of random interest, is, you can use them in soil agriculture. A couple of people use them to wet the substrate for mushroom growing, and then other people can use it for stuff like algae growth. So if people if you actually want to farm algae for energy or food supplements or whatnot.
Just to that point, I think if you do see the residue building up of the nutrients at the bottom, it is, like Dilhan said, make sure you wash it all out and then start fresh again, because otherwise it can get caught on the base of the unit as well, which you really don't want to have. Is there any other questions from anyone else that we can help you with?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. There is a question from Nerida, and the question is, how do I get a nutrient meter? Do fruiting plants such as strawberries need extra? And I get the most awesome tasting tiny wee strawberries. Wondering if those are the alpine strawberries in the VIP kit that we recently launched. In terms of the nutrient meter, there are a couple of places you could get one from. We are going to try launch one in around 2 months if you want to get one from us. Otherwise, a common brand is Blue Labs, which we would still recommend. I think some of the difficulty with the nutrient meters is knowing how much nutrients to add, and how to kind of make sure that you're tailoring the right stuff to your plants. But we're trying to develop a bit of an app or just a calculator that you could use on our website to go on and add your nutrient concentration, and then it'll tell you how much more nutrients you need to add. So stick tight for that one, and hopefully we'll have something to offer there. Otherwise, with strawberries, because they're a fruiting plant, they need a little bit of a different nutrient composition to what we typically offer. We've got, in nutrients, there's the NPK ratios, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate. The fruiting plants need a lot of phosphate, whereas leafy greens and stuff, they are more nitrogen and potassium. So we also do have a fruiting nutrients, and I think I can talk to Tamara about getting you some, because we do have some in the warehouse that we don't sell through the website.
So just another point as well, I was reading some of the comments in here. So basically, things like lettuce, it's a one-off use and you're done with. But if you had for example, a basil plant, and it's grown out over this, basils can get quite big, and you don't have room here to grow. And I know I've been talking to Nerida about this, is that sometimes you can take this whole basin out and you can put it outside or in a sunny area, and it will continue to grow. And we do have the excess basins here, the additional basins that you can buy on itself to do the replacements, which means it will allow you to rotate your crops. So you can grow a new one in here, and you also have the other one outside there. And it's not much of a cost of buying a new unit.
Just taking this question here as a live one. So how to keep your plants from growing leggy. So leggy plants generally happen when the plants aren't getting enough light. So you could bring the plants closer to the light, or the light closer to the plants on the other end. Another reason could be, actually pretty much, the main reason is the light. So I'd recommend, trying to reduce the distance. It depends what kind of plant you've got though. So I will go through the chat and find out who asked that, and what type of product you've got, and try and answer that one in a bit more detail. In terms of this one, using a heat mat or water heater. So if you're growing soil plants, then a heat mat can be okay, like for germinating stuff. In hydroponics, warm water can be the death of your plants. So when it gets too warm, there's not much oxygen in the system, and it leads to a bacteria that causes this thing called root rot. The bacteria gets in the roots, it lives in the warmer temperatures of the water, and then it just kills them. So I'd be hesitant warming up the water basin itself.
I guess on that, I could just mention that if you are finding that you have a draft, perhaps, like if you enclose it with something like a cardboard or something like that, that might help sometimes, to reduce the draft that comes in, that makes the area really cold. Like especially if it's against a wall or some tiles or something, it can be quite cold as well, especially in winter. One of the other things I do, and I have tested sometimes, is the sprouting jars. You might have seen it in my community page where I have wrapped it like a little baby in a kitchen towel and kept it there for a little bit because it was quite cold. And once it germinates, then you can take it out and continue to grow it. So I might actually mention a little bit more about the sprouting jars. So basically, you can do your sprouting, like I said, in the jars. But it's really essential that you wash out your jars. You rinse your jars and your seeds with the water 2 to 3 times a day. 2 times is good, but if it's really a bit warmer weather, it's best to do it 3 times a day if you can. And run it with the lid on and the mesh on. Run it under the water, under running water, and it'll clean it up. I usually like to wash my sprouts before I eat it, so I put it in a basin, I wash it out, and then I would consume it. The other alternative is, you probably already heard that these are like all the stories from your grandparents, that you might rinse your leaves in either salty water or diluted vinegar, and then use it before you actually consume it.
Awesome. So it looks like we've answered most of the questions in the chat. I'd request if everyone could please head to the poll and just give us some feedback on how the webinar was. And if you have any ideas on topics you'd like us to cover for the next webinars, then we'd really appreciate that. It's always good to know exactly what people want us to cover. We can obviously tailor the content a lot better rather than kind of trying to guesstimate what is important to everyone. So I'd like to thank everyone again for joining our webinar. We really appreciate you coming in and asking all the questions you've got. I think it's really great to do some kind of community events like this. I would encourage everyone to check out our community page. Stay in touch. If you have any questions, don't be a stranger. Speak to our customer service team and you'll always get an answer. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Tamara, thanks for co-hosting with me. Some of you may have been expecting Caitlin. She was sick today, but Tamara filled in, thankfully, and I hope she was able to impart some useful knowledge to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. I'll stay on and answer any questions if anyone's sticking around. And if anyone does want to pop on stage, I can actually invite you. And if you want to have a chat through video, then that's also fine. You can hop on. This app lets us do anything.
I don't think we have any more questions, Dilhan.
Great. I'll wrap it up then. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.
All right. See you, everybody. Bye.